for joining us. I'm Jackie Nespral. In just days, voters in Florida will decide on a series of issues. Two of them are among the most controversial in the history of state politics: abortion rights and the legalization of marijuana. Steve Litz gives us an overview of both issues.
Voters in Florida are set to decide one of the most controversial issues in the history of state politics: abortion rights. The procedure right now is banned after 6 weeks. Constitutional Amendment number 4 would change that, ensuring that no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. Some against abortion rights are confident voters will reject going back to the previous time frame before the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade.
In order to amend the Constitution, you need 60 plus 1. And I see all the polls now hovering around 55, 56, 57%. So I would not pop open champagne bottles just yet.
Today, abortion providers and activists look to bolster their campaign in favor of the amendment, telling real-life stories of patients who had serious health complications because of Florida's 6-week abortion ban.
It's not uncommon to see a patient come in at 12 weeks along in a pregnancy with bleeding. The bag of waters has prematurely ruptured. The pregnancy can't continue. And this heartbreaking reality leads women to develop fever and sepsis and hemorrhage.
Voters in Florida are set to decide if marijuana should be legal for all adults 21 years and older. Governor Ron DeSantis was in favor of medical marijuana, with his administration implementing what industry experts call a successful statewide program for growing and distributing medical marijuana. But recreational marijuana, he says, is just a money grab by Florida medical marijuana companies.
So they're putting that in the Constitution. So yes, you do have that right, but only if you buy it from them. You can't grow it in your backyard. You got to buy it from them. So they're creating in our Constitution a big weed cartel. Amendment
3 says this: allows adults 21 years or older to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and marijuana accessories for non-medical personal consumption by smoking, ingestion, or otherwise. Existing medical marijuana companies would take the lead and continue growing and selling marijuana products. The Vote No on 3 campaign calls recreational marijuana unsafe, bad for communities, and a monopolization for marijuana companies. The campaign in favor of adult use argues the opposite.
Almost half of Americans now legally enjoy this freedom.
And we know Floridians are ready.
More than ready.
To finally stop arresting adults who use marijuana.
I'm Steve Litz, NBC6 News.
It's not just abortion and marijuana that you'll be deciding on. Voters will also be presented with Amendment 1, which would impact our school board elections. If voters vote yes come 2026, school board elections will become partisan. That means when you look at your ballot next to the school board members' names, you will see their political party. Sofia Hernandez explains.
It's not unusual, but in most places across the country, when they run for school board, they do it without a party label.
Political science professor Sean Foreman says there's a reason the state moved to nonpartisan school board elections in 1998 to remove politics out of decisions on education and curriculum. Currently, 9 states have partisan school board races, but if applied in Florida, Foreman believes it will bring changes. At the ballot box, voters might be inclined to do less research.
Follow the D or R, and they'll get the expected outcome that goes along with the party platform.
Foreman states voters who are independent would not be able to vote in the primaries, and those who want to run for school board elections and are not affiliated with a party won't be as likely to campaign. It could also impact those elected on the board.
If somebody gets elected with a party label, they're more likely to do what the party members want, which on the one hand is good for the party, but probably not good for education policy.
But routine school board meetings have already become a political battleground at times, most recently at Miami-Dade Public Schools.
They spend the most time in our schools. And
7 hours of public comment on whether or not the district should recognize LGBTQ History Month. The board ultimately voting no. Political analyst Brian Crowley says in the last 2 elections, Governor DeSantis endorsed candidates, already making it clear where their party loyalty lies without partisan elections.
I think everybody knows, who pays any attention to school boards, that who's a Democrat and who's a Republican on these seats. I'm not sure if we go to partisan races, it's going to make a really big difference, because that's where we are now.
Sophia Hernandez, NBC6 News.
And Florida voters will also be deciding whether to adjust the homestead property tax exemption annually for inflation. Right now, homeowners are permitted to reduce by the assessed value of their home by $50,000, which in turn reduces the property tax burden. That $50,000 is divided into 2 halves, one that applies to taxes that help pay for school districts and the other that applies to taxes that do not. Amendment 5 would increase the $25,000 exemption that applies to non-school taxes to be consistent with the rate of inflation, further reducing their tax burden. Now, Amendment 2 aims to establish a constitutional right to fish and hunt. Supporters say it is a necessity to protect the outdoor recreation industry and give power back to Florida residents. But critics argue the specific language of the amendment could put the state's wildlife and its ecosystems at risk. Amendment 6 aims to end the public financing of campaigns for governor and cabinet positions like attorney general. Supporters say it could help reduce the influence of big money contributors in statewide elections, but those against it have ridiculed the program as welfare for politicians. Voters shot a similar proposal down in 2010. If you're scrambling to figure out the wording on your ballot, you're not alone. Many Floridians have a hard time deciphering texts some argue is confusing and possibly misleading. Hatzel Vela sat down with a voter who reached out to us hoping we could help.
Let's go through each amendment.
We sit down with Greg Govia, who lives in Kendall.
Just state the facts.
Now 67, the retired IT guy is getting ready to cast his ballot.
How can I find out more information about that to really make an informed decision?
It's the text on some of the ballot measures, particularly the amendments, which makes him uneasy.
NBC happens to be a station I watch.
So he reached out to us, hoping we could help him decipher this year's ballot. Greg believes some of the language on the ballot is concerning, says his neighbors might be in the same spot because he believes the language is misleading.
Correct.
He's specifically talking about Amendment 4, which would provide a constitutional right to an abortion before viability or when needed to protect the woman's health.
And it sounds fairly straightforward. No law shall prohibit, penalize.
That's the amendment summary. But then there's more in the paragraph below.
The proposed amendment would result in significantly more abortions. Well, how do they know that? And why would we actually put something like that in our Constitution?
The answer is no. That does not go in the Constitution. It's what's called an impact statement.
They seem to be more than impact statements. They seem to actually be trying to sway opinion rather than just state the facts.
That impact statement has created quite the controversy. Proponents of the amendment wanted it out because they thought it was inaccurate. And rather than describe budget consequences, it was the state trying to advocate against the constitutional amendment.
We are getting phone calls almost weekly.
Leah Blumenfeld of the League of Women Voters in Miami-Dade says they're often hearing from people who want to better understand what's on the ballot. So here's the easiest way to think about Amendment 4.
People who support the 6-week abortion ban need to know that they should vote no. And those who are opposed to the 6-week abortion ban then would want to vote yes on 4.
We also got extra help.
But this is Amendment 4.
From FIU law professor Howard Wasserman, who taught us something.
Look for the language that is right at the top.
If you want to see exactly what will be added to the Constitution, we found the state document that tells you.
That underlined language, that's the key language. That's what's actually going to be in the Constitution.
And that says, except as provided in Article 10, Section 22, no law should prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. You talk to Greg, he'll tell you he doesn't think it has to be this hard.
I just wish I was just given the facts.
In Kento, Hatzavala, NBC6 News.
Now, when it comes to expanding abortion rights beyond 6 weeks, opponents insist the language in the constitutional amendment is deceptive and would water down state laws regarding abortions. Activists in favor of abortion rights insist if the measure passes, state laws would not be affected and parents would still be required to grant permission for a minor to have an abortion. As Steve Litz shows us, it's all about 3 words: notification, permission, and consent.
Activists against abortion rights talk about the power of the Florida Constitution, overriding, they say, just about every state law regarding minors receiving abortions.
As the constitutional amendment will tie the legislature's hands.
Matt Staver, founder of the anti-abortion rights group Liberty Counsel, says the law, called Parental Notice of and Consent for Abortion Act, would no longer be enforceable. Like, a physician must obtain written consent from a parent or legal guardian. Notice must be directly, in person, or by telephone to a parent or legal guardian of a minor by a physician at least 48 hours before, and violation of this subsection by a physician constitutes grounds for disciplinary action.
This is a constitutional amendment. It would trump any state law. So all the state laws that are there, except for one, and that's notice, all of those would be invalid if Amendment 4 is passed because the constitutional amendment overrides any state law.
But people in favor of the abortion rights amendment insist current laws will stay intact. Amendment 4 would ensure no law prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion.
We think parents have every right to control the health care access of their underage children.
Anna Hokemer with Florida Women's Freedom Coalition calls the opposition campaign hypothetical scare tactics.
We do not believe that it would vacate the Florida legislature's power to pass laws requiring parental consent.
Amendment 4, like all of those others on November's ballot, needs approval from 60% of the voters in order to pass. I'm Steve Litz, NBC6 News.
Now, we also want to share with you a brand new Decision 2024 poll conducted by NBC6 and Telemundo 51 with Mason Dixon to get a better idea of where Floridians stand on key issues this November. We asked Floridians how they would vote on Amendment 4, the Right to Abortion Initiative. 61% voted yes, agreeing that no law should prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability. 33% of those polled voted no, and 6% remain undecided on the issue. The marijuana legalization initiative would allow adults 21 years and older to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and accessories for non-medical personal consumption. But it's stirring up some controversy within the Republican Party. The medical marijuana initiative, which was adopted by Florida voters in 2016 by a vote of 71 to 29%, is something that most agreed on, left, right, and center. But Amendment 3 is something else altogether, dividing many in the state and would make Florida the 25th state to legalize recreational marijuana. Governor DeSantis has opposed the amendment, saying he thinks the amendment is too broad and would impact the quality of life in Florida.
Your life will be impacted by this. It will change the quality of life in our communities. You will smell it when you're walking down a lot of these streets, particularly in our urban areas. We've seen what's happened in Denver and some of these other places. I think this amendment is the broadest amendment yet. And I think it's basically going to green light marijuana usage in all these different parts of the state.
But some within the Republican Party have separated with the governor on this issue and have voiced their support for the amendment, including former president and current Republican presidential nominee and Florida resident Donald Trump, who said he will vote for Amendment 3 and support states' rights to pass marijuana laws. The Florida Young Republicans split with the Florida Republican Party, giving their support for Amendment 3, as well as some prominent conservative state leaders like former Republican State Senator Jeff Brandes.
Well, I've supported Amendment 3 for years. In fact, for 4 years while I was in the legislature, I filed a bill that would have essentially done a lot of what Amendment 3 was planning to do. But I think it's the right thing to do. I think I'm somebody who believes adults should be able to make adult decisions and that Florida should allow for adult use.
Do you fear at all that it will change the landscape of our community?
No, I don't. I really don't. I think the legislature still has a lot of ability to put some rules together for Amendment 3 and for adult use. For specifically, they can do things like medical marijuana. They can say you can only be smoked in private places. I'm hoping that they'll allow, cities and counties to designate public spaces you can smoke it or use it. I think they can set certain other limitations on it.
Florida already has 25 licensed medical marijuana companies or treatment centers, which would now be able to sell recreational marijuana products without criminal or civil liability under Florida law if it passes. If approved, the measure wouldn't take effect for 60 days, and the Florida legislature would determine processes for entities to acquire licenses to sell it. Amendment 3 will be on the November ballot and will need 60% of the vote to pass. Like Florida, the Commonwealth of Virginia also approved medical use. But the state also allows people to grow their own plants. And those in favor of legalizing pot say this setup has created confusion. Hatzel Vela traveled to Virginia to show us how that state situation could help you figure out how to vote on Amendment 3.
We suit up, clean up, all before going inside.
We're here in our cultivation, manufacturing, and retail facility in Manassas, Virginia.
We traveled here because we wanted to learn and share with you all there is to know about the marijuana industry in Virginia.
So we have our CO2 tanks.
Trent Wolovic is our tour guide. Jushi is the company.
Clarity equals purity.
Virginia, he tells us, like Florida, has medical marijuana.
Dark chocolate.
In this facility, we quickly learn about the science behind cannabis.
We're walking into the lifeblood of this facility, which is...
And the tight controls in place.
We can control the temperature, we can control the humidity.
We saw how plants grow.
So these are what are called clones.
Week after week. This is what a marijuana plant looks like at 7 weeks. Now, at this point, you can see the flowers, which growers say that's a sign that it could be harvested in about a week. Virginia is set up into 5 health service areas for their medical program.
So we do anywhere between 400 to 500 pounds every week or so.
But in 2021, Virginia also legalized possession and cultivation, allowing adults to grow up to 4 plants at home.
We've had a large gap between decriminalization and then implementation of a program.
Our state is unlike any other in the union. It is an absolute mess.
Jason Blanchett heads the Virginia Cannabis Association and supports a recreational program.
This is not a partisan issue. This is, we need to put a regulatory framework in place.
Without an adult retail market, people are doing whatever they want.
State Senator Aaron Rouse is behind a bipartisan bill that allows for recreational use.
You would never drive out the black market, but what you hope to attempt to do is you want to mitigate a lot of those concerns, especially when it comes around untested, unsafe products.
His bill passed the Assembly, but Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin vetoed it earlier this year.
Well, the decriminalization of marijuana possession has led to a tremendous amount of uncertainty and confusion, particularly in law enforcement.
The governor cited increases in gang activity and violence in states where the retail market has been legalized. Mainly, he argues, because the black market does not go away. Back at the facility,
this is when the plant gets chopped and harvested.
We visit the last stage in cultivation when the plant is being cured.
This should smell like what?
Each one with a particular smell, ready to be packaged.
So this is where the patients come to actually get their products.
And sold to thousands of medical marijuana patients. In Manassas, Virginia, Hatzel Vela, NBC 6 News.
Now, we also want to share with you a brand new Decision 2024 poll conducted by NBC6 and Telemundo 51 with Mason Dixon to get a better idea of where Floridians stand on key issues this November. On Amendment 3, the marijuana legalization initiative, 58% said they would vote yes to legalize recreational marijuana for adults 21 and older. 35% said they would vote no, and 7% remain undecided. To learn more about these amendments and other local issues, take out your phone and scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to the local politics section of our website, where you can explore all the different things you will be voting on.